My name is Rowan Hayes, and I am 35 years old. As I stand here in the dappled afternoon light of my parents' backyard in Maple Creek, Vermont, a familiar ache blossoms in my chest. My older sister, Serafina, is gathering our family, her smile a little too bright, her gestures a little too grand. For 20 years, our lives have been a quiet, undeclared competition, one she has always been determined to win. Today, she believes she is about to deliver the final, crushing blow, a public declaration of my failure. What she doesn't know is that the keys to her most coveted dream, a lovely little cottage on Lake Quillen, are resting in my pocket. I've learned that the most profound lessons aren't taught through destruction, but through the quiet, unassailable power of truth. To grow up as Serafina Hayes' younger sister was to learn the art of becoming invisible. 2 years my senior, she was a whirlwind of vibrant energy and effortless charm, a sun around which our family often orbited. Our childhood home, a rambling colonial with a sprawling garden, was a place of warmth and comfort. Dad was a history professor at the local university, a man of quiet thoughts and worn tweed jackets. Mom was a librarian, her love for stories matched only by her love for us. They raised us on a diet of classic literature, homegrown vegetables, and the steadfast belief that kindness was a currency more valuable than money. Somehow, these lessons settled differently in our hearts. I was the observer, the one who found solace in the quiet hum of the forest behind our house, in the patient work of tending to my small patch of the garden. While other girls spent their allowance on fashion magazines, I saved mine in a ceramic jar for a telescope I desperately wanted. My world was ordered, my ambitions quiet but deep. I had a 10-year plan before I even knew what that meant, a steady, internal compass guiding me toward a life of purpose and independence. Serafina, on the other hand, craved the spotlight. She was a performer, her life a stage on which she needed constant applause. She collected friendships like beautiful, shiny objects and developed a taste for luxury far beyond our family's means. Where I saw value in the slow, satisfying work of building something from the ground up, Serafina saw the allure of instant gratification and the validation of external approval. Her ambition wasn't rooted in malice, but in a deep, gnawing insecurity I could never quite understand. The pattern began early. I remember a 5th-grade art project, a detailed diorama of a woodland scene for which I'd spent weeks collecting moss, twigs, and tiny, hand-painted clay animals. My teacher had called it a work of remarkable patience and artistry. At the parent-teacher open house, I heard Serafina explaining to a group of her friends that she'd had to help me with the creative parts because I was more of a technical person. I felt a sting of injustice, but said nothing, retreating into the quiet shell I was already building for myself. It became our unspoken dance. She would claim my light, and I would dim it for her, believing it was the only way to keep the peace. In high school, the dynamic solidified. When I won a statewide essay contest, Serafina told our extended family she'd helped me brainstorm the core ideas. When I was accepted into a prestigious business program at Boston University, she framed it as me finally taking her advice to be more ambitious, despite the fact she dropped out of art school after a single semester. Our parents, caught in the middle, never quite saw the full picture. Dad would suggest I was being overly sensitive, while Mom would sigh and say, "That's just Serafina's way. She loves you dearly." They adored us both, but in their desire to avoid conflict, they had inadvertently become enablers of Serafina's behavior, finding it easier to soothe her ego than to confront the subtle cruelty of her actions. After graduating, I poured my heart and soul into building my own company, Hearthwood Designs. I saw a niche in the market for ethically sourced, handcrafted wooden home goods. My first few years were a blur of 16-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and unwavering determination. I lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery, the scent of fresh bread my only luxury, and funneled every dollar I made back into the business. Serafina, meanwhile, drifted between jobs in high-end retail, always quitting when the work became too mundane or the management failed to recognize her supposed brilliance. As Hearthwood Designs began to grow, first with a feature in a prominent design blog, then with a small but loyal team of artisans I'd gathered, Serafina's narrative shifted. Suddenly, she was my biggest cheerleader, my unofficial brand consultant. At family dinners, she would hold court, speaking about our brand and the advice she'd given me that had led to my success. I learned to navigate these moments with a placid smile, keeping the true state of my business, my finances, and my life a closely guarded secret. While Serafina leased a new luxury car every few years and rented a chic downtown apartment she constantly complained she could barely afford, I lived simply. My comfortable but modest townhouse and my reliable, decade-old sedan were choices, not limitations. I was building real wealth, a robust retirement fund, a diversified investment portfolio, and a significant emergency fund. Serafina, however, saw my frugality as a lack of sophistication, a sign that my little craft business was likely not as successful as I pretended. For years ago, on a family trip to the Adirondacks, we discovered Lake Quillen. Tucked away in a quiet corner of the mountains, it was a jewel of pristine water and whispering pines. It was there that Serafina first saw the cottage. It wasn't a mansion, but a beautifully designed cedar and stone home with a wide porch, a stone fireplace, and a private dock that stretched into the crystalline water. It was listed for an ambitious $1.5 million. For the rest of the vacation, it was all she could talk about. She took dozens of photos during an open house, making grand plans for the family Christmases and summer reunions she would host at her lake house. Ever since, at every family gathering, she would sigh dramatically and lament that someone else had bought her dream, a dream for which she'd never had a single dollar of the down payment. What no one in my family knew was that about 8 months ago, Hearthwood Designs had faced its first real crisis. My most talented artisan, a man whose intricate woodwork was the cornerstone of my best-selling collection, announced his sudden retirement due to a health issue. Finding a replacement with his level of skill proved nearly impossible, and a major shipment of rare maple wood I'd prepaid for was lost in a shipping company's bankruptcy. It was a perfect storm. My cash flow tightened dangerously, and I had to take out a short-term loan to navigate the turbulence. Serafina must have found out somehow. I suspect she snooped through the mail on my kitchen counter during one of her visits. I'd caught her once before, thumbing through a stack of letters, and had brushed it off. I should have known better. Then, last month, a strange twist of fate. The Lake Quillen cottage, Serafina's dream home, reappeared on the market. The couple who had bought it were going through a contentious divorce and needed a quick, uncomplicated sale. The price was reduced to $1.1 million. The moment I saw the listing, a quiet, audacious idea began to take root in my mind. It was a gamble, perhaps even a petty one, but after years of quiet endurance, something inside me refused to let the opportunity pass. I spent a week of sleepless nights on the phone with my financial advisor, running numbers, weighing the risks. It would require me to liquidate a large portion of my emergency savings and some of my long-term investments. I created a discreet LLC to keep my name off the initial paperwork and, with my heart pounding, made an all-cash offer. The timing was almost poetic. The closing was scheduled for the Saturday morning of our annual family gathering. A part of me wrestled with the ethics of it all. Was I using my hard-earned money simply to teach my sister a lesson? Or was this, finally, my chance to draw a line in the sand, to establish a boundary that had been eroded for decades? As I signed the purchase agreement, I told myself this wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. It was about standing in my own light, a light I had spent a lifetime allowing her to dim. The annual Hayes family gathering is a tradition as old as the maple trees that line my parents' property. Every August, relatives from across the country descend on Maple Creek for a day of potluck dishes, well-worn family stories, and the inevitable simmer of unspoken tensions. I usually look forward to it, a chance to reconnect with my favorite cousin, Pippa, and to share a quiet moment with my Uncle Leo. This year, however, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach as I pulled into the familiar gravel driveway. The business challenges, while temporary, were not something I was prepared to discuss. I had to temporarily scale back production and let 2 part-time artisans go while I sourced a new master woodworker. To someone like Serafina, who viewed the world in black and white, these normal entrepreneurial hurdles would undoubtedly look like catastrophic failure. I checked my phone for a final confirmation from my real estate lawyer before stepping out of the car, a dish of my homemade rosemary roasted potatoes warming my lap. Today, maintaining an air of calm was paramount. "Rowan, you made it." My mother, her silver hair catching the sunlight, rushed to greet me with a hug that smelled of lavender and freshly cut grass. "Everyone's so excited to see you. Even your Aunt Corinne drove up from Philadelphia." The backyard was a kaleidoscope of summer life. Long tables draped in checkered cloths, colorful paper lanterns strung between trees, and my father presiding over his enormous grill, a contented king in his smoky kingdom. Dozens of relatives milled about, their laughter a familiar soundtrack to my childhood summers. "Where's Serafina?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant as I placed my dish on the groaning potluck table. Mom's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, she's around here somewhere. Holding court with the aunts, I imagine. She's been acting very secretive all morning. Said she has a special announcement to make later." The knot in my stomach cinched tighter. Mom must have read my expression because she quickly added, "I'm sure it's just one of her dramatic flourishes. Maybe she got that promotion at the boutique she wanted." I forced a nod. Yes, probably. As I moved through the crowd, I was enveloped in a flurry of hugs and inquiries. Cousin Caleb wanted my advice on starting an online store for his wife's pottery. Uncle Simon was eager to show me photos of the new deck he'd built using a design he'd seen on my company's blog. Normally, these conversations filled me with a quiet pride, a validation of my hard work from the people who mattered. Today, I felt like a spectator at my own family party, my mind preoccupied, scanning the crowd for Serafina. I finally spotted her near the birch trees, deep in conversation with our cousin Beatrice and Aunt Corinne. When Serafina saw me watching, she offered a wide, brilliant smile and a wave, then leaned in to whisper something to the others. They both turned to look at me, their faces suddenly etched with pity. "Don't you let her get to you." A low voice spoke behind me. I turned to see my cousin Pippa, holding out a glass of chilled white wine. Pippa, a sharp-witted tax attorney, was the only one I'd confided in about my business struggles. "Whatever game she's playing, it's about her, not you." "I know," I sighed, the cool glass a welcome anchor in my hand. "I just don't understand why she still does this. We're in our 30s. Isn't there a statute of limitations on sibling rivalry?" Pippa snorted delicately. "For normal people, maybe. But Serafina has built her entire sense of self on a foundation of being the more successful sister. The fact that you're actually successful and she's just playing the part makes her desperate." We were interrupted by my father's cheerful call to lunch. My mother's carefully arranged place cards had, of course, seated me directly across from Serafina. She was already captivating our end of the table with a story about a recent weekend trip to a vineyard, artfully implying it was a romantic getaway with a wealthy suitor. Her outfit was a study in conspicuous consumption, a silk dress I knew she couldn't afford and would likely return next week, and a pair of designer sunglasses pushed back into her perfectly styled hair. "Rowan," she exclaimed as I sat down, her voice full of theatrical warmth. "I was just telling everyone I've been researching real estate investments. It's so crucial to have tangible assets, don't you think? Especially in such a volatile market." The question, so pointed, made my breath catch. Surely she couldn't know about the cottage. The closing wasn't even final. "It can be," I said, my voice carefully neutral as I helped myself to a scoop of salad. "If you choose your properties wisely." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was perfectly audible to everyone at our table. Well, I've been learning so much about financial stability lately. It's so important to be prepared before an economic downturn. Some businesses, especially these little artisanal ones, are just so fragile, you know. A wave of heat washed over my face as several relatives glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I kept my expression serene, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. I would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. The meal continued under a cloud of rising tension. More and more family members began to eye me with that same look of pity. Cousin Marcus asked, with feigned casualness, how Hearthwood was weathering the supply chain issues he'd been reading about. Aunt Corinne gently suggested she knew of an opening for an office manager at her husband's firm if I was ever looking for something more secure. By the time dessert was served, a beautiful blueberry crumble my mother had made, I felt emotionally bruised. I excused myself to use the restroom, desperate for a moment of quiet. In the cool, familiar half-bath off the kitchen, I leaned against the door and closed my eyes. I checked my phone. A single text message from my lawyer. All clear for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Congratulations on your new property, Miss Hayes. A strange sense of calm washed over me. Whatever Serafina was planning, my response was now set in stone. I looked at my reflection, took a deep breath, and walked back out into the fray. I found my Uncle Leo by the dessert table, thoughtfully enjoying a slice of the crumble. He was a quiet man, a carpenter with kind eyes and hands weathered by his trade. He saw things other people missed. Your sister's on a crusade today, he observed, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question. So it seems, I replied, picking up a small brownie. Any idea what this grand announcement of hers is all about? Uncle Leo gave me a long, knowing look. Nothing good, if her gossiping with Corinne is any indication. But let me tell you something I've learned in 40 years of marriage to your Aunt Iris. People who feel the need to shout from the rooftops are usually standing on very shaky ground. I gave him a grateful smile. I know you're right. I just wish. My thought was cut short by the sharp, insistent clinking of a spoon against a glass. We all turned. Serafina was standing at the head of the main table, her face glowing with a triumphant, self-important light. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment? I have something very important I'd like to share with you all. The lively chatter of the party died down as all eyes turned to her. She stood there, poised and radiant, her expression a careful mask of solemn concern. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I made my way back to my seat, a silent passenger on a collision course I had seen coming all day. First, I want to thank Mom and Dad for another beautiful family day, Serafina began, raising her glass to our parents, who beamed with pride, completely unaware of the ambush to come. Family is the most important thing in the world to me. And that's why it's so vital that we support each other, especially when one of us is going through a difficult time. She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes finding mine across the yard. The faux sympathy in her gaze made my stomach clench. I'm sure many of you have sensed that our dear Rowan has been a bit subdued today. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Well, she continued, I feel it's my duty as her older sister to be honest with all of you, because Rowan needs our love and support now more than ever. I gripped the edge of the wooden table, my knuckles white. Beside me, I felt Pippa shift in her seat, her concern a palpable presence. It absolutely breaks my heart to have to tell you all this, Serafina said, her voice catching with practiced emotion. But Rowan's business, Hearthwood Designs, has failed. She's had to file for bankruptcy. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, swept through the backyard. It was the exact reaction she had orchestrated. Shocked faces turned toward me, a mixture of genuine worry and ill-concealed gossip. The word bankruptcy hung in the air like a pall of smoke. I found the legal documents last week, she added, a clever lie to lend her story credibility. She's lost everything. The banks are in the process of seizing her assets. My mother's hand flew to her lips, her eyes wide with shock. Rowan, honey, is this true? Why didn't you tell us? Before I could form a response, Serafina swept in again. She was too ashamed, Mom. You know how proud she is of her little business. But we're family. There are no secrets here, no shame. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She had simultaneously diminished my life's work and violated my privacy under the guise of familial love. Actually, I began, my voice tight. But Serafina held up a hand, silencing me. I've already told her she can move into my guest room for as long as she needs. And I've started reaching out to some of my contacts about job opportunities. Her voice was now dripping with magnanimous generosity. It might be good for her, really, to have the stability of a regular paycheck for a change, without all the stress. I remembered, with a sudden, painful clarity, offering Serafina a well-paying position in my company's sales department 2 years ago when she'd been laid off. She had laughed, telling me she could never work for her little sister. The hypocrisy was staggering. My father stood up, his face a mask of worried confusion. Rowan, we're just hearing about this now? We would have helped you. Every eye in the yard was on me, waiting for my confirmation or denial. The truth was nuanced. My business was not failing, it was pivoting. I had already found a new, even more talented artisan in Maine, and the setback had forced me to develop a new direct-to-consumer strategy that was already showing promise. But explaining the complexities of a business turnaround in this moment would sound defensive, like the desperate scrambling of a person in denial. I took a slow, deep breath, meeting my sister's triumphant gaze. Thank you for your concern, everyone, I said, my voice remarkably steady. But Serafina is mistaken. My business is undergoing a restructuring, but it is far from bankrupt. I appreciate the thought, but I have everything under control. Serafina's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, Rowan, honey, there's no need to be brave. I saw the papers. Chapter 11. It's not something you can just wish away. The specific lie, naming the chapter, was a masterful touch, designed to make my general denial seem flimsy. I saw several relatives nod, their belief shifting firmly to her side. Perhaps this is a conversation for later, I said, my composure beginning to fray. We're all family here, Serafina insisted, her arms spread wide in a gesture of inclusivity. There's no need for embarrassment. Failure is a learning opportunity, though some of us did try to warn you about the risks of being a small business owner. She had never said any such thing. In fact, she had often mocked my cautious, debt-averse approach to growth. The casual rewriting of our history was infuriating. I quietly excused myself from the table and walked toward the house, the weight of dozens of pitying stares on my back. Inside the cool sanctuary of my parents' kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter, my breath coming in ragged waves. My phone buzzed. A text from Pippa. Want me to accidentally trip her into the koi pond? It coaxed a weak smile from me. Then, another message appeared. It was my lawyer with an attached PDF. The final closing statement. Uncle Leo appeared in the doorway, his presence a quiet comfort. He closed the door, giving us a measure of privacy. Your sister could win an award for that performance, he said, leaning against the doorframe. She's always had a flair for the dramatic, I replied, putting my phone away. He eased himself into a kitchen chair and motioned for me to do the same. You know, I've watched you two your whole lives, he said, his voice gentle. Serafina was always the peacock, all bright feathers and loud calls. But you, Rowan, you were always the owl. Quiet, watchful, and a whole lot wiser than anyone gave you credit for. I managed a weak smile. Not wise enough to see this coming, apparently. I don't believe for 1 second that you're bankrupt, he stated with unshakable certainty. But even if you were, what of it? You think any of us would love you any less? Your value to this family has nothing to do with your bank account. His words landed in a part of my heart that had felt bruised for years. I had spent so long defining myself in opposition to Serafina, If she was loud, I was quiet. If she was impulsive, I was measured, that I had forgotten to simply be myself. "Thank you, Uncle Leo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." "So," he asked, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief, "what's the plan?" Because I know Rowan Hayes, and she always has a plan. I hesitated for a beat, then gave him a small, firm nod. "I do. It happens tomorrow morning." "Good girl," he said, pushing himself to his feet. "Now, let's get you back out there before your mother starts a GoFundMe page for your non-existent financial ruin." We walked back into the yard together. Serafina was still the center of attention, now regaling a rapt audience with her noble plans to help me get back on my feet. I took my seat, picked up my fork, and calmly ate a piece of blueberry crumble, letting her words wash over me like a summer storm. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, the weather would change. The rest of the gathering passed in a surreal haze. The annual family party had been officially rebranded as the Save Rowan intervention. Relatives who typically only offered a polite nod now approached me with solemn faces and unsolicited advice. My Aunt Corinne cornered me by the drinks table, her voice low and conspiratorial. "You know, my neighbor's daughter does wonderfully with one of those network marketing companies. Skincare. Perhaps something to consider for a little cash flow." She pressed a glossy brochure into my hand. My cousin Marcus, who had declared bankruptcy twice himself, offered to take a look at my books and show me where I went wrong. Through it all, Serafina drifted like a benevolent queen, bestowing her pity and wisdom upon her subjects. Her performance was flawless. When she was near me, her expression was one of deep, sisterly concern. When she thought I wasn't looking, I caught glimpses of a smug, triumphant satisfaction that made my stomach churn. She had successfully cast herself as the wise, stable older sister, generously stooping to lift her reckless younger sibling from the ashes of her failed ambitions. "Rowan, I've been thinking," she announced loudly, ensuring several aunts could overhear. "Once you're settled in my guest room, we should go through my closets. I have some lovely business casual pieces you could borrow for interviews." The implication that I would need her cast-off clothing when my own wardrobe was filled with high-quality, understated pieces I had bought and paid for myself was a masterstroke of subtle humiliation. I offered a tight, polite smile and walked away. My parents, bless their hearts, were adrift in a sea of confusion. My mother kept trying to feed me, as if my financial troubles might have led to malnutrition. My father awkwardly mumbled something about his pension plan being in good shape if I needed a short-term loan. Their love was not in doubt, but their readiness to accept Serafina's narrative without question was a separate, deeper wound. As the afternoon sun began to dip below the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn, I found myself on the old wooden swing set at the far edge of the yard. It had been my refuge as a child, the place I went when Serafina's teasing became too much to bear. Some things, it seemed, never changed. "Room for one more?" I looked up to see Pippa, holding 2 glasses of rose. I smiled and shifted, making space for her. She handed me a glass, and we swung in comfortable silence for a moment. "Remember that time in middle school when Serafina told everyone you had a secret crush on Mr. Albright, the ancient history teacher?" Pippa asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. I groaned at the memory. I was mortified for a month. Everyone in my grade started calling me Mrs. Albright. And do you remember what happened a few weeks later? A smile played on my lips. I accidentally let it slip to her crush, Nate Jacobs, that she slept with a giant stuffed unicorn named Sparkles. Pippa clinked her glass against mine. "You've always known how to play the long game, Rowan. That's why I'm not worried." My phone buzzed. Serafina's name lit up the screen. "Speak of the devil," I muttered, letting it go to voicemail. A moment later, she appeared at the edge of the lawn, a determined look on her face as she strode toward us. Pippa saw her coming and whispered, "Showtime," giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze before making a graceful exit. Serafina took Pippa's place on the swing, her silk dress looking absurdly out of place on the weathered wood. Up close, I could see the fine lines of tension around her eyes, the brittle perfection of her smile. "You've been avoiding me," she said, her tone one of feigned injury. "I can't imagine why." "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Rowan. I was just being honest with the family. They had a right to know." I stopped swinging and turned to face her. "A right to know what, exactly?" "That you rifled through my private mail, misinterpreted a document you didn't understand, and then broadcast your flawed conclusion to 40 people without even thinking to speak to me first? Is that the honesty we're talking about?" Her eyes narrowed. "I saw the bankruptcy filing, Rowan. Don't try to deny it. What you saw were contingency plans my lawyer drafted. Standard practice in any business. They were never filed. My company had a setback, Serafina, not a collapse." Doubt flickered in her eyes for a half-second before being replaced by her usual stubborn certainty. "Well, the family needed to be prepared to help you. I'm looking out for you. I've already cleared out the guest room. It's small, but it's better than being homeless, which seems to be where you're headed." The deliberate cruelty of her words landed with a dull thud in my chest. This wasn't about concern. This was about power. She wanted me small, dependent, and grateful for her charity. "I'm not moving in with you, Serafina. My house is fine. My business is fine. My life is fine." She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. "We'll see. I've already told Mom and Dad that I'm taking you to see a financial planner on Monday. I'm not going to let your pride get in the way of getting the help you so obviously need." As she walked away, my phone lit up with a notification. A text message from her, sent to the entire family group chat, so worried about Rowan. She seems to be in deep denial about her situation. If anyone has any job leads for her, please send them to me. She's too proud to ask for help herself. I stared at the screen, watching as messages of support for Serafina's noble efforts began to pop up. The performance was relentless. The depth of her need to see me brought low was, for the first time, truly clear to me. Later, as I was helping my mother clear the last of the dishes in the kitchen, she approached the subject with delicate caution. "Honey, about what Serafina said. Is there any truth to it?" I carefully stacked the plates on the drying rack and turned to her. "Mom, if I were truly facing financial ruin, do you honestly believe the first you'd hear of it would be from Serafina, as a public announcement at a family party?" She had the decency to look chagrined. "Well, no, of course not. But she just seemed so certain. And you have been so stressed lately." "I had a major supplier issue, Mom. It's been stressful, but it's manageable." What Serafina did today was take a private struggle and turn it into a public spectacle. And everyone, including you and Dad, just accepted her story. My mother wrung her hands with a dish towel, her expression troubled. "You know how she gets when it comes to you and your success. She's always been so sensitive." The old excuse, the one I had heard my entire life, made my jaw tighten. "That's not sensitivity, Mom. That's a choice. And it was a cruel one." Before she could reply, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. I excused myself and stepped out onto the quiet back porch. "Rowan, good news," his cheerful voice came through the line. "Everything is set. We're confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow to sign the final papers and transfer the funds. The sellers are already out, so you'll get the keys immediately after." "Congratulations." As I hung up, I saw Serafina watching me from the other side of the yard, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. In that moment, my purpose crystallized. The cottage on Lake Quillen wouldn't just be an investment. It would be the stage for a long-overdue reckoning. Sunday morning broke cool and clear, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. I woke in my old childhood bedroom, the familiar scent of cedar and my mother's flower garden drifting through the open window. My parents had insisted I stay the night, their concern for my fragile state making it easier to agree than to argue. I dressed with intention in a pair of dark trousers and a crisp, cream-colored silk blouse. The outfit was professional, understated and confident, a silent rebuttal to the narrative of my supposed ruin. As I applied a touch of makeup, I mentally rehearsed the conversation to come. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. It wasn't about punishment, it was about boundaries. Downstairs, I found my father at the kitchen table with the Sunday crossword. He looked up, surprised by my attire. "You're dressed for business on a Sunday," he observed. "I have an important meeting this morning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. He put down his pen and looked at me, his expression serious. "Rowan, about yesterday. Your mother and I have been talking. If you're in trouble, we want to help. There's no shame in it." I sat across from him, the warmth of the coffee mug seeping into my hands. "Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not in trouble. I am not filing for bankruptcy. Hearthwood had a challenging quarter, but we are already recovering. What Serafina told everyone was a harmful lie, based on a document she had no right to see." He looked from me to his half-finished puzzle, his brow furrowed. "But she was so specific. She said she saw the filing. She saw a draft of a worst-case scenario plan. It was never filed. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to call my accountant tomorrow morning. He will confirm everything." A flush of embarrassment crept up my father's neck. "I should have come to you directly." "Yes," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You should have. For 35 years, you and Mom have managed Serafina's feelings while expecting me to absorb the impact. I'm done absorbing it, Dad." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of unspoken history. Finally, he met my eyes and nodded slowly. "You're right. We haven't always been fair to you in that regard. I'm sorry, Rowan." The simple, direct apology was a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was so deep. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you. So, what's this meeting?" he asked, eager to move to safer ground. A small smile touched my lips. "A real estate investment. In fact, I should go. I'm meeting the agent at 9. As I collected my bag, my phone buzzed with a group text from Serafina, taking Rowan out for a lovely brunch to talk through her next steps. "We'll update everyone on how she's doing later. Thank you all for being so supportive of her during this crisis." The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. I hadn't agreed to any brunch. I quickly typed a reply to the group. "Can't make brunch, have a prior commitment." Rain check. Her private message to me was immediate and sharp. "What commitment?" "Stop avoiding this, Rowan. You need help." I ignored the bait and sent her a new message, for her eyes only. "Meet me at 10:30. The Daily Grind coffee shop on Lakeside Road in Quillen. We need to talk." I could almost feel her smug satisfaction through the phone. She thought I was finally surrendering. Her reply was sickly sweet. "Of course, sis. Whatever you need. I'll be there for you." The 2-hour drive to Lake Quillen was meditative. The rolling green hills of Vermont gave way to the more rugged beauty of the Adirondacks. I felt a sense of calm purpose settle over me. The folder with the closing documents sat on the passenger seat, a tangible symbol of the new reality I was about to create. The closing was quick and efficient. I signed my name what felt like 100 times, initialed stacks of papers, and authorized the wire transfer. And then it was done. The lawyer slid 3 sets of keys across the polished table. "Congratulations, Ms. Hayes. The cottage is yours." I drove the final few miles to the property. It was even more beautiful than I remembered. The cedar and stone cottage was nestled among tall pines, its wide porch overlooking the sparkling expanse of the lake. A stone path led down to a private dock where a small rowboat bobbed gently in the water. I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The air smelled of wood smoke and lemon oil. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the great room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. A massive stone fireplace stood as the heart of the home, flanked by comfortable-looking armchairs left by the previous owners. The kitchen was a dream of dark granite and gleaming copper pots. Upstairs, the master bedroom had a small balcony that felt like it was suspended over the water. It was Serafina's dream, Yes, but standing there, in the quiet solitude, I realized it was mine, too. It was a place of peace. At 10:15, I sent Serafina a new text, change of plans. Meet me at 11:40, Lakeside Road instead of the coffee shop. What's that? She replied instantly. Just put it in your GPS. See you in a bit. I made a fresh pot of coffee and carried 2 mugs out to the rocking chairs on the porch. At precisely 10:43, Serafina was constitutionally incapable of being on time. Her sleek white convertible crunched up the gravel driveway. She got out, looking confused, checking the address on her phone. Her confusion deepened as she took in the house, a puzzled frown creasing her brow. When she saw me sitting on the porch, she stopped at the bottom of the steps. Rowan? What are you doing here? Is this some kind of Airbnb? She climbed the steps, her brunch attire looking jarringly formal against the rustic backdrop. I gestured to the empty, rocking chair beside me. Have a seat. I made coffee. She remained standing, her gaze sweeping over the property. Seriously, what is this place? Are you dog-sitting for a client? I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moment hang in the air. You don't recognize it? I'm surprised. You've only described it as your dream house about 1,000 times. Her eyes widened as recognition finally clicked into place. She spun around, taking in the familiar roofline, the stone chimney, the private dock. This is the cottage on the lake? The one that was sold years ago. It came back on the market last month, I said quietly. I held up the set of keys, the small metal teeth glinting in the sun. Would you like a tour? She stared at the keys, then back at my face, a wave of understanding washing away her confusion. You bought this house? How? You're bankrupt. And there it was. The word spoken aloud. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Serafina. I'm not bankrupt. I never was. Serafina stood frozen on the porch, her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. The narrative of her own success, propped up by the story of my failure, was collapsing around her. But the filing, she stammered, her voice losing its polished edge. I saw it. You saw a draft of a contingency plan, which was never acted upon, I said, placing the keys on the small table between us. Hearthwood had a difficult few months when my main artisan retired unexpectedly. But we've already recovered. In fact, we're stronger than ever. She slowly sank into the rocking chair, her designer handbag clutched in her lap like a life raft. So you're not moving into my guest room? The question was so small, so absurd in the face of the massive truth between us. No, Serafina, I am not. Then why did you let me? Why did you let everyone believe? Let you? I interrupted, the calm I had so carefully maintained finally cracking. You went through my private papers, Serafina. You concocted a story to humiliate me, and you announced it to our entire family as if it were fact. I didn't let you do anything. She had the grace to look away, a flush rising on her cheeks. But defensiveness quickly followed. I was worried about you. I was trying to help. Were you? I asked, my voice soft again. Or were you enjoying the idea that for once, you were the successful one, and I was the one who needed saving? Her silence was a confession. I continued, this pattern between us, Serafina. It's been going on our whole lives. And I've enabled it by staying quiet. But that's over. Today, it's over. She stared out at the shimmering lake, her profile rigid. What pattern? You've always had it so easy. The good grades, the scholarships, the successful business. Do you have any idea how hard it is to live in your shadow? The sheer, staggering irony of her words made me want to laugh. My shadow? Serafina, you have spent our entire adult lives trying to outshine me, taking credit for my successes, and belittling my hard work, all while living a lifestyle you can't afford just to keep up appearances. That's not true, she whispered, but the protest was weak, brittle. Isn't it? Yesterday, you had a choice. You could have called me, asked me if I was okay. Instead, you chose public humiliation. Why? She picked at a loose thread on her dress, her gaze fixed downward. I think, I said, choosing my words with care, that you saw an opportunity. You thought I was failing, and a part of you was thrilled. Because if I failed, then by comparison, you were succeeding. A single tear escaped and traced a path through her perfect foundation. It's not fair, she said, her voice choked. Everything you touch turns to gold. You never struggle. That is the biggest lie of all, I replied. I struggle constantly. Building a business is a daily act of wrestling with fear and uncertainty. The difference is, my self-worth isn't tied to whether or not I'm doing better than you. I reached into my bag and handed her a tissue. And for the record, buying this house was a huge financial risk. I had to liquidate a huge chunk of my savings to make it happen. She dabbed at her eyes. Then why did you do it? I gestured toward the magnificent view. Partly as a long-term investment. But mostly it was to prove a point. To you and to myself. I was tired of being the quiet one, the one who stepped aside. I wanted to show you, and maybe myself, what I was capable of. To my utter astonishment, a small, watery laugh escaped her. Wow, that's actually kind of brilliant. In a very cold, calculating way. The unexpected flicker of her old, sharp humor broke the tension. I felt my own lips curve into a smile. I prefer to think of it as a masterclass in setting boundaries. So what happens now, she asked, waving a hand at the house around us. You've made your point. Are you going to ban me from the property? Is this your way of officially writing me off? It was the question I had been asking myself for weeks. That depends entirely on you, I said. I didn't buy this place just to spite you. I bought it because I want things to be different between us. I stood and walked to the porch railing, breathing in the scent of pine and water. The truth is, I miss my sister. Not the competitor, not the performer. The girl who used to braid my hair for school pictures. The one who knew exactly how to make me laugh when I was sad. I miss that girl. When I turned back, she was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen since we were children. Pure, unguarded vulnerability. I miss her, too, she whispered. Then let's make a deal, I proposed. A new set of rules for the Hayes sisters. Rule 1. Total, brutal honesty. No more performing, no more secrets. Starting right now. Why did you really do it, Serafina? She took a long, shuddering breath and finally let go of the handbag. Because I'm failing, Rowan. I'm drowning in credit card debt. I'm about to lose my car. The boutique I work at is cutting my hours. My whole life feels like a lie. And when I found those papers, for 1 second, I felt powerful. I thought, finally, something where I'm not the one who's failing. The confession, so raw and painful, hung in the air between us. Thank you for telling me that, I said softly. Why couldn't you have just told me you were in trouble? Pride. The word burst from her. How could I admit that my brilliant little sister built a company from nothing while I can't even manage to pay my visa bill? I sat down beside her again. Success isn't a competition. And it's certainly not just about money. Easy for you to say from the porch of your $1 million lake house, she muttered, though the bite was gone from her voice. Is it? I work until midnight most nights. I haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years. My last relationship fell apart because he said I was married to my business. There are a lot of ways my life doesn't look like a success story. She looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time in a decade. I guess we've both been telling stories about each other that aren't true. Exactly. So here's the deal. This cottage has 5 bedrooms. One of them can be yours to use whenever you want. On a few conditions. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You would let me stay here? After what I did? If I said, holding her gaze, you agree to the new rules. The honesty. The end of the competition. And you have to tell the family the truth about what you did yesterday. She flinched. They'll hate me. They'll be hurt, I corrected gently. But if you own it, they'll respect you for it. And in return, you get more than just access to a vacation home. You get a chance for us to actually be sisters again. And I added, I'll help you sort out your finances. No judgment. Just a practical plan. She looked from my face to the sparkling lake and back again. For a long moment, I saw the old pride warring with this new, fragile vulnerability. Then, her shoulders slumped in a gesture of surrender, and I saw my sister again. Okay, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'd like that. I held out my hand. Deal. She ignored my hand and pulled me into a fierce, unexpected hug. Deal, she murmured into my shoulder. When we pulled apart, I picked up the keys from the table and pressed them into her palm. Why don't you go take a look around? I'll make us some more coffee. As she disappeared inside, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, I took out my phone and started a new group text to our family. It was time for everyone to hear the truth, this time from both of us. 2 weeks later, we gathered again, this time at Lake Quillen. The invitation, sent jointly from Rowan and Serafina, had caused a stir of confusion and curiosity. The great room, now filled with my own simple, elegant hearthwood furniture, was buzzing with relatives. My parents arrived first, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. Rowan, it's just breathtaking, my mother said, walking straight to the windows. But I don't understand. When? How? It was the meeting I had the morning after the party, I explained. When Serafina walked in carrying a platter of homemade appetizers, a hush fell over the room. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a soft sweater, her face free of the usual mask of heavy makeup. When everyone had arrived, she stood by the fireplace and clinked a glass. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice clear and steady. I have something to say. At the family gathering 2 weeks ago, I told you all that Rowan's business was failing and that she had filed for bankruptcy. That was not true. A collective intake of breath swept the room. I found a private document. I made a terrible assumption, and then I chose to announce it publicly to hurt my sister. It was a cruel and selfish thing to do, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. She then looked directly at me. Especially to you, Rowan. I stepped forward to stand beside her, a silent gesture of solidarity. We invited you here today to start over, I said. This house isn't a trophy or a weapon. We want it to be a place for our family to heal and reconnect. Serafina nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Rowan has offered to share this beautiful place with me, despite everything. She has shown me a grace I did not deserve, and she has reminded me what it truly means to be a sister. In the months that followed, our family's landscape began to slowly, carefully regrow. The change wasn't instantaneous. It was a series of small, intentional choices. Serafina, with my help, created a budget, consolidated her debt, and found a new job in gallery management where her eye for beauty and her people skills could truly shine. She began to find her worth not in what she owned, but in who she was. My business flourished. The new artisan I'd found brought a fresh perspective, and our new direct-to-consumer model was a runaway success. The crisis, which Serafina had tried to frame as my ruin, had actually been the catalyst for my greatest period of growth. The cottage on Lake Quillen became our sanctuary. We spent weekends there together, talking for hours on the porch, rebuilding the trust that had been eroded over decades. During one of those weekends, as we watched the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Serafina turned to me. You know, she said thoughtfully, that day you bought this house, you could have destroyed me with it. You had every right. I watched a lone loon glide across the water. That was never the point. I was angry, yes. But I think, deep down, I wasn't trying to win. I was just trying to end the game. Well, you did, she said with a wry smile. Nothing pops a bubble of arrogance quite like seeing your bankrupt little sister holding the keys to your dream castle. The funny thing is, I confessed, the real value of this house has nothing to do with the property. It's what happened inside it. It's the place we finally started telling the truth. She nodded, a genuine peace settling on her features. I realized then that the announcement that was meant to be my public humiliation had, in a strange and beautiful way, set us both free. In trying to tear me down, Serafina had inadvertently given us the one thing we both needed, a reason to rebuild. What's your experience with family rivalries? Have you ever had a turning point that transformed a difficult relationship? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of sisterhood and redemption resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, sometimes the path to healing begins with the very moment designed to break us.